Hello, I'm Alexandra and I'm here to talk about the development of my design brief. My project is focusing around the Sustainable Development Goals of good health and well-being, with a focus on mental illness, so specifically anxiety and depression in Australian women. Mental illness has been stigmatised throughout history, and whilst discussion has increased over the last decade, very little has changed around the associated stigma. As of 2014, 54% of individuals with mental illness did not access any form of treatment. During 2020 and 2021, more focus was placed on mental health due to the effect of isolation and uncertainty of the pandemic. 20% of Australians between the ages of 16 and 34 experienced high or very high levels of psychological distress, with women more likely to experience it than men. In that same time period, 3.4 million Australians between the ages of 16 and 85 saw a health professional regarding their mental health, with the two most common disorders being depression and anxiety. There is very little discussion happening on a micro level, especially regarding what people living with depression want others to know, and creating education in a way that is accessible to people with no context, all of which would lay the foundation to erase much of the stigma faced today. From my research into precedents, I discovered a broad collection of ways art and design have explored mental illness. The most influential precedents for my project included Fujita Keisuke's voltaic realism, Corinne Weaver's work, The Psych's Gifts, and Mark Starmack and Elizabeth Commandier's Intangible Goods. Keisuke's voltaic realism displayed real-time suicide tweets on a digital readout, which triggers the equivalent amount of carbon that it took to send to be etched away as a physical mark of an intangible sentiment. The idea of lighting up the sentiments of people with depression played strongly into the development of my first experiment. Corinne Lightweaver's work, The Psych's Gifts, is a published journal of her collage works exploring her mental illness and journey, and the idea of a more intimate guided narrative was appealing due to the more personal tone and potential impact on the audience. Mark Starman and Elizabeth Commandier's Intangible Goods is a vending machine dispensing positivity. This was a smart use of audience participation as well as combining art engagement and fundraising for relevant organisations. All three of these approaches were successful at examining mental illness, depression, and anxiety from differing angles and resulted in dramatically different outcomes, all of which dramatically shaped the brief. The brief for this project is to create awareness and public conversation about living with anxiety and depression through public artwork looking at the narrative of living with these illnesses. There should be an emphasis on both women between the ages of 16 to 35 living with depression and anxiety, as well as the stigma associated with it. This is a sign is designed as a light installation, with the context of being included in an event like Vivid. Designed as a series of neon signs that light up after dark, they display the thoughts and feelings expressed by women with depression. The choice of neon signage is intentional, to contrast with the typical novelty use of neon, and the bright colours to draw attention and inspire the audience to question their expectations and why these thoughts, and depression itself, is so stigmatised that we must light it up to get attention. This installation is intended as public art or as part of a larger show, due to the importance of foot traffic to engage people. However, to reinforce that this work is about isolation and stigma, ideally it would be placed slightly separate from the major Vivid precincts. Hyde Park would be an ideal setting for this is a sign. This work also has the possibility of being a collaboration between artistic communities, mental health communities and groups, and the general public to contribute thoughts and feelings to be selected for the final collection. Illustration, text, animation, and sound. The illustrations are designed to be sketchy and reminiscent of a private journal or diary. The name blue comes from the term to have the blues, which has often been used to dismiss depression in women. The palette of the ebook focuses on tones of blue to reinforce this sentiment. A more experimental media form, one of Blue's major strengths is its flexibility. It can operate on an iPad and it can be projected onto a large screen for exhibition purposes. It can be downloaded independently by audience members from the App Store, meaning that it is highly accessible worldwide and has the potential to raise money for a mental health organization if it were to be monetized. Blue also has the most potential for expansion into a series, adaptation into a short animation, or into a physically published book to expand its accessibility further. Intruder is a gallery installation revolving around the concept of intrusive thoughts. Created around the idea of participating in a show such as The Big Anxiety, Intruder is staged on a wall covered with post-its. The majority of the post-its have ordinary thoughts and feelings on them, whilst the minority have intrusive thoughts. Audience members are encouraged to add their own post-its. They can contribute something neutral, or they can set free their own intrusive thoughts. The intention is the concept of the brain working against itself, and that so much about mental illness is left unsaid, and that depression is often a forgotten or background diagnosis that isn't talked about but is still felt. Intruder was designed with post-its due to their size and ubiquity, and ease of allowing audience contributions, as well as the colour. Whilst yellow is often seen as a positive colour, in this case it is undermining the negative thoughts on the post-it, much like intrusive thoughts do. This combines with the physical texture and presence of Intruder as it builds to feel like the audience is in an overwhelmed, overburdened mind, once again reinforcing the message. Researching and developing this brief has allowed me to experiment across mediums and take into consideration aspects of design that I hadn't previously experienced. Overall, I believe this brief has strong foundations and I look forward to the work that develops from it. Thank you.